Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Today we are continuing on with Freshly Ground Coffee by Arxaris, and we are doing the last chapter today, chapter 4. There is a chapter warning on this one. It just says there are normal amounts of My Hero Academia blood in this chapter. So if you're a little squeamish about blood talk, just be warned. Bakugo didn't fully realize he was walking back to BeansPot until he turned the corner into the small parking lot and the sign came into view. Slowing his steps, he wondered what the fuck he was doing. He knew Kirishima wasn't there. He'd literally just seen him. Bakugo shook his head at himself. He was about to turn around and head back to his house when something caught his eye, causing him to pause. Kirishima's blonde, definitely actually not boyfriend, had just walked out of the coffee shop, hand in hand with the shy barista. Bakugo didn't know his name, as he rarely worked the relatively busy morning shift, but he'd seen him several times before. Bakugo made eye contact with the blonde. Miri bro, his brain helpfully supplied, but he fucking refused thanks, and his face flushed. However, as friendly as ever, the guy smiled brightly and waved as they passed him. Bakugo nodded his head once and willed himself not to frown. If his lip quirked a bit, it was only because he was in a good mood. And maybe a little because Bakugo felt kind of shitty about staring daggers at him every day when apparently he'd been trying to help him. Bakugo looked back at them as he tossed the wrapper of the takeaway sandwich he'd grabbed from the combini after leaving the grocery store without any food. The pair were heading in the same direction he'd need to go home, and now that they'd seen him, he'd look fucking weird if he turned around and followed them. Despite feeling somewhat ridiculous, Bakugo made his way to the shop, opting to go in and grab a coffee that he definitely didn't need in order to spare himself any more awkward interaction with the blonde. He was barely 2 steps inside when he froze in place at the sight of a pink head of hair, freshly dyed. "Where the fuck have you been?" he blurted. Mina, tan and freckled and obviously just back from vacation, rolled her eyes. "Nice to see you too, Blasty," she said dryly, and Bakugo hardly even registered the use of Kirishima's nickname for him. "Not that it's any of your business, but I'm half Hawaiian, and we do a holiday thing there every few years." Bakugo flushed, feeling slightly guilty. He supposed it wasn't like it was her responsibility to fix the mess he'd made. "Sorry," he grumbled awkwardly. "Anyway," Mina replied, glossing over his rudeness, "you ready to talk now? You were pretty upset the last time I saw you." Bakugo nodded gratefully, but didn't respond further. He realized he had no idea where to start. "Hang on," she said, looking at him sympathetically. "I'll go tell Ida I'm on my break." 10 minutes later found them sitting at Bakugo's usual table with 2 steaming matcha lattes between them. Mina hadn't bothered to ask him what he wanted. She had, however, charged him for both their drinks with a sweet smile. "So," she started in, "you want to know how long he's known your name isn't really Takahashi, huh? Or," she added slowly, brows shooting high on her forehead, "have you not figured out that's why he's not talking to you?" Bakugo's eyes widened. "I figured it out," he growled defensively, leaving out the fact that he'd literally only just pieced it together half an hour ago. "And does literally fucking everyone know?" Her lip curled into a sly smirk, and she shrugged lightly. "It's only ever been our resident meathead in the dark." Bakugo blinked at her in shock for a minute, then exhaled as the fight left him. He slumped back in his chair, took off his cap, and ran his fingers through his hair, figuring he was beyond the point of truly needing to hide anymore. The sun was setting outside, and he was the only customer in the place. They closed in half an hour. "Fine," he spat. "I'm shit at disguising myself. Whatever. Just tell me how to fix this. Why is he so damn sad around me all the time?" The word pity ran through his mind, and he recalled Kirishima's words at the store. Mina sighed. I told you. I tried to talk some sense into him, she said, because I've watched you two for long enough to know you're just emotionally inept. But think about it from his perspective, Blasty. She sent a sharp look in his direction. He's been flirting with you for months, and he's been wildly forward about his thing for Ground Zero the whole time. He finds out that he's been professing his love and joking around about your damn wedding to you. You never made a move, dude. He's embarrassed as hell for unknowingly pushing himself onto someone who, in his mind, doesn't reciprocate his feelings. Bakugo, whose eyes had grown wide as she spoke, sputtered wildly. But he started, then cut himself off. But I do, he trailed off, processing her words fully. Shit. Mina gave him a quirk of her lip that did nothing to hide her opinion of his intelligence. Plus, she went on, he hides it well, but Kiri's never been super confident. I told him you're just a moron. Bakugo ground his teeth together, but he didn't deny it. But he keeps saying shit like, a guy like him could never want someone as boring as me means. He's a hero. I work in a coffee shop. Bakugo, despite himself, smiled at her Kirishima impression. It was spot on, sparkling eyes and all. Still, though, he was soon frowning again as guilt twisted in his stomach. He's just being nice because he feels guilty. It's pity, bro. Nothing real. He hadn't known Kirishima struggled with self-doubt, and maybe he couldn't have, but he couldn't help feel like if he'd only paid closer attention, if he hadn't been so determined to keep him at arm's length, so self-absorbed with his endless what-if questions, perhaps he would have noticed it. He felt like shit. How'd he figure it out? He croaked. He didn't quite manage to make it sound like a question. He probably didn't even need an answer, but he was curious all the same as to what little things Kirishima had picked up on, while Bakugo himself had been busy with his head up his own ass. Mina chewed on her bottom lip, thinking. Your eyes, she said after a minute, and even though he felt numb inside, those two words made his heart stutter. He met her gaze once more, and had the feeling she could see right through him. Yeah, I know, she said with a small smile. Something out of a rom-com, eh? In my opinion, you're so obvious all the time, with your attitude and your hair and hell, even your ear piercings. But Captain Obvious didn't notice anything until you took your glasses off and he saw your eyes. Bakugo gulped. Mina chuckled. He was furious with me, oh God, for not telling him, I mean, she added at his questioning look. Then she reached out and flicked him hard on the forehead, and he managed a half-hearted glare in response. I thought you'd eventually use the Ground Zero thing to make a move, dumbass. Bakugo had to agree with her. Mina, the shop owner called out, making them both jump. 2 minutes. Mina grimaced, downing the rest of her latte and licking green foam from her lips. Any more questions, Blasty boy? She asked, or do you have what you need to go get your man? Bakugo thought for a moment. The blonde guy, he said slowly. They're not. Mina smirked. They're swole mates, if you must know. My angsty little hero. He's not dating at all right now, so he's been at the gym a lot. Bakugo rolled his eyes at the dramatic address, ignoring the leap his heart gave. He thought back to that first day the blonde had showed up. He had been so sure something was happening between them. Hell, Kirishima had even... But no, he said... Bakugo pressed her. He said he was flirting with him. This time, Mina gave an undignified snort. Yeah, Tamaki's new favorite story, she replied. Bakugo raised a brow impatiently as the owner called her name again, and she stood. That was the first time they'd met. Kirishima has a type. She looked him up and down pointedly. Didn't realize he was hitting on his senpai's soon-to-be boyfriend. Mirio thought it was hilarious, and he was super nice about it. But Kirishima was an embarrassed mess for the rest of the day. She finished with a laugh, but Bakugo froze in his spot, going back over that day with a new perspective she'd given him, trying to make things add up. He'd heard Kirishima flirting, but he'd admittedly not heard anything the blonde guy had actually said. Bakugo had interpreted his smiling and blushing as mutual interest, had thought Kirishima's shy body language was overly obvious preening. But wait, he blurted as Mina started to walk away. The cup. Kirishima gave his number on a stupid coffee cup, the cheesy fucking asshole. Mina's brows knitted together for a second. Then a look of realization came over her face. She smacked him lightly across the head, her patience running out. He was writing down Tamaki's work schedule for the week, you idiot. You aren't the only coffee shop romance going on around here, she said. Coffee shop romance? He repeated, not following. She rolled her eyes. It's a thing, just trust me. But an explanation of that one is going to cost you at least another drink, preferably a harder one. With that, Mina left him with his thoughts and his barely touched latte. He finished it slowly, turning their conversation over in his mind. When he left, he brought the dish to the counter and for once in his life said a very heartfelt thank you. Time passes. The next day, Bakugo finally decided he was done playing it safe, done waiting. He was going to march straight into BeansPot with his stupid and seemingly ineffective against anyone other than actual rocks disguise and let Kirishima Eijiro know just how fucking special he was to him. No more games, no more lies, no more grocery store stalking or mug breaking. They could get their feelings out in the open and then use all the energy they'd been spending on misinterpreting literally everything to focus on building a relationship with each other. It was a great plan. One that Kirishima would probably call manly when he looked at Bakugo with those adoring heart eyes that he never properly appreciated before and that he missed so damn much now. Normally, Bakugo would hate something so public. Hell, he still might, but this wasn't about him. It was about Kirishima, and he wanted the whole world to know Kirishima was his person. Wanted Kirishima to know he wanted that. Wanted Kirishima to know that if he ever implied he wasn't good enough for Bakugo again, he'd kick his fucking ass because professional hero or not, Bakugo knew he was the real reacher here. Unfortunately for him, the universe didn't seem to want any of that because less than 5 minutes before he was planning to leave, he got a call that both his interns had called in sick for the day. Bakugo cursed them both under his breath for the entire duration of his walk to work. Simultaneously, he had spent a great deal of his commute questioning what the point of opening his own agency was if he was still subject to picking up last-minute weekend shifts like a fucking sidekick. He was counting down the minutes until his patrol ended from the second it began. If everything went fine and he ran straight back to the agency to get showered and change, he could make it to the coffee shop just before Kirishima's usual shift ended. So naturally, with less than a half an hour to go before he was off the clock, he heard the telltale sound of gunshots being fired, seemingly only a few streets away from him. He took off at a run, and barely 20 seconds later, he got a text from Deku requesting backup for a violent altercation between two notorious villain gangs. Of fucking course, he shouted, palms heating as he charged up a big explosion. I can't catch a single fucking break around here. He released his quirk, shaking the ground with a gigantic boom as he propelled himself through the sky and over top of the building separating him from Deku's location, screeching curses at the villain gangs all the while. Fuck stealth, he thought, as a feral grin stretched over his face. They dared to ruin his plan. He was going to make them fucking pay. Time passes. All right, that's it, the police officer interviewing Bakugo finally said. Thanks for the assistance. Bakugo rolled his eyes, sneering at him. The asshat acted like he and Deku had merely screamed for help or something, rather than taking out an entire fucking mob of villains without any help, only for the police to arrive after all the action was over. This whole ordeal meant he would have to wait days to talk to Kirishima again, as he usually had tomorrow and the next day off. The least this fucker could do was give him credit where it was due. Deku seemed to sense his foul mood and quickly interjected a loud, "Thank you, sir, it's no problem." The officer nodded at him, then pointed towards the ambulance where several apprehended villains were being patched up. "You two will want to go get checked out, especially you, Ground Zero," he added, glancing down at Bakugo's leg. Bakugo followed his gaze. His thigh had suffered a rather large gash in the heat of the fight when the two gangs had temporarily teamed up against them, and the blood was staining the already scorched and torn pants of his hero costume. Bakugo grimaced as he looked down at it, suddenly much more aware of the pain. "Right," he grumbled, already turning away from the policeman. "Merry Christmas," said the officer in closing, and Bakugo grunted in response, still annoyed. Deku covered for him again. "Merry Christmas to you too, sir," he chimed. "Thank you for spending Christmas Eve out here with us instead of at your home. We truly appreciate you." Bakugo froze, then spun around, cutting the officer off mid-sentence. "What did you just say?" he growled. Midoriya blinked at him. "I said we truly appreciate— Not that, fuckhead," he snapped. "What fucking day did you say it was?" "Christmas Eve?" he replied, voice lilting at the end in question. Bakugo's eyes shot wide. Midoriya was looking at him like he was insane. "Fuck!" he shouted. "Why didn't you fucking tell me that, dumbass?" Bakugo gaped at him. "Excuse me?" Bakugo made a sound that was a half groan and half growl. "Never fucking mind," he yelled, and he turned on his heel to head not in the direction of the paramedics, but rather straight for BeansPot. "Kachan!" Deku yelled out after him, clearly concerned. "Your leg!" Bakugo ignored him, muttering curses under his breath, along with suggestions for exactly where Deku could shove his concern. He supposed that explained why both his interns were suddenly sick. He glanced at his watch and then at the surrounding street signs as he booked it as fast as he could with an injured leg towards the coffee shop. BeansPot closed in half an hour, but it wasn't that far. 10 minutes by foot, maybe 15 with his thigh split open the way it was. He quickly ripped off a bit of material from his shredded pants and tied it around the gash to stem the flow of blood. Then he got moving again, picking up his pace as he worried his lower lip with his teeth. Kirishima almost never worked the late shift, but he at least had to try. He hoped against hope that at the very least whoever was working would tell him where he could find him. Kirishima had already struggled enough with confidence issues, had already spent unnecessary time thinking that Bakugo wouldn't want him, and had already been feeling down enough to stop dating. There was no way in hell Bakugo was going to let him spend the one most romantic holiday of the year alone. Fuck that. Time passes. 15 painful minutes of fast-paced limping later, Bakugo finally made it to the parking lot of the coffee shop. "Thank fucking God," he mumbled, hurrying along the line of storefronts towards BeansPot, his path illuminated by Christmas lights and holiday window displays. He could hardly appreciate them, though, between the throbbing pain of his leg and the warm light spilling out from the glass door of the coffee shop that was calling his name. Bakugo stretched out a hand as he approached the door, noticing distantly that the cut on his palm had reopened during the fight. He was bleeding through the bandage Kirishima had put on him, but he couldn't bring himself to care, not now. Switching hands, he reached for the door and pushed it open as he looked to see who was working. He froze mid-push with his hand against the glass and breath catching in his throat. Kirishima. For a second, all Bakugo could bring himself to do was stare. It was stupid, really. He'd seen him barely more than 24 hours ago, and he fucking knew what he looked like, okay? But he was so stupidly adorable, with his hair down and soft, and covered in a clashing red Santa hat. He was wrapped in Bakugo's hoodie again, as he should be, always, and the tips of his fingers were barely visible, sticking out from overly long sleeves. Both his hands were tightly gripping the remote control to the small TV that was mounted in the corner, on which his worried eyes were locked despite Bakugo's entrance triggering the bell. Belatedly, Bakugo heard the voices of reporters coming through the old crackling television speakers and realized that Kirishima was watching the news about his and Deku's fight. Bakugo let go of the door and walked towards the counter, trying his hardest not to limp too much. The few remaining patrons in the shop started whispering in concerned and excited tones before he'd made it halfway there. He could clearly make out his hero name along with the word bleeding, but he had more important things to worry about. He stopped in front of the register, but Kirishima still hadn't looked away from the TV, completely transfixed. "What are you doing here?" Bakugo asked, as gently as possible. Kirishima jumped. "Oh, sorry." His eyes went wide as he abruptly cut himself off. The remote control slipped from his hands, but he didn't even try to catch it. "Takahashi?" he yelped, looking at the TV and back again. "Oh my god, thank God you're all right. I was so worried." He reached across the counter without seeming to give it a second thought, grasping Bakugo's hand in his own as if to make sure that he was really that it was really him. Bakugo felt his cheeks go ruddy, and he chuckled despite himself. "Katsuki's really fine, I think, at this point," he offered, quirking his lip. Kirishima blinked at him for a moment, then started laughing. "Right," he said, shaking his head, as he turned a color that would probably rival Bakugo's. "That's gonna take some getting used to." Bakugo smiled, averting his gaze. Fuck, it felt so nice to finally just talk to him again. "Kirishima," he tried once more. "Why are you working tonight?" "Oh," he replied. Bakugo couldn't help but notice the way his face fell, just a bit. "Tamaki wanted to do something romantic with Mirio for Christmas Eve, so I switched shifts with him." He didn't miss the unspoken "because I didn't have anything else to do." A few days ago, he'd likely have interpreted it as jealousy over Mirio instead, but he had grown since then, thanks. Bakugo opened his mouth to reply, pausing mid-word when he heard a camera shutter go off behind him. Kirishima blushed deeper as his eyes flashed to the customers, who Bakugo realized were likely all attempting to take photos of Ground Zero holding hands with a barista. Bakugo felt Kirishima start to pull his hands back, and he tightened his fingers just forcefully enough to stop him. Kirishima looked up at him, eyes wide. "Katsuki?" he whispered, glancing around. "People are going to get the wrong idea if you don't let go." Bakugo took a deep breath and ran his free hand through his hair. It was now or never then. "Kirishima," he started, heart hammering in his chest. "That's the idea I want them to get." Kirishima blinked at him, his expression clearly conveying his disbelief. "But what do you mean?" Bakugo rolled his eyes. "I've been in love with you since the first fucking caramel latte, you giant idiot." Kirishima's eyes went round as saucers as he opened his mouth and then closed it, and then opened it again. "What?" he sputtered. But that's impossible. I'm sorry. What?" Bakugo narrowed his eyes, pointing at him with one finger of his bandaged hand. "If you say anything self-deprecating right now, I swear I'll knock your ass out on our first date," he threatened. Then, replaying his words in his head, he cursed under his breath. That is, fuck. That is, if you want to go on a date with me." Bakugo stuttered, then winced. This was not at all the manly confession he'd imagined. To his horror, Kirishima started laughing. Bakugo felt his cheeks turn impossibly redder as Kirishima clutched his stomach, felt his blush start to spread down his neck and chest. "Listen, shitty hair, you don't have to fucking laugh at me." "No!" Kirishima squeaked between giggles. "It's not that." He was clearly trying to calm himself down, and it was a testament to how fucking far gone Bakugo was for him that he waited his laughing fit out without stomping out of the shop. "I'm not laughing at you," Kirishima was finally able to say. "Not like that, anyway. Katsuki, you already know in an unfortunate amount of detail how into you I am." Bakugo huffed a chuckle, despite himself, running his free hand through his hair. "No, shitty hair. I know how into my hero persona you are," he said, then rolled his eyes. "Which, by the way, you didn't need to get so fucking embarrassed about that." Bakugo lowered his voice, ignoring the flush of his cheeks, and continued, "I used to think that kind of shit about All Might." He left out the fact that was when he was a teenager, and that he never fucking would have been caught dead saying any of that out loud. He doubted it would have had the same comforting effect with those caveats. Kirishima laughed again. "I said I wanted to marry you, dude," he whispered, finishing with a groan. "Then it's pretty fucking unmanly of you to chicken out and go back on your word, huh?" Bakugo teased. Kirishima's eyes went wide, but he couldn't tame his smile. "How could I possibly only like your hero persona when the real you is so much better?" he whispered, and it sounded almost as if he were speaking more to himself than to Bakugo, but Bakugo's cheeks flared anyway. The pain in his thigh throbbed as he fought down a stupid grin, and he leaned against the counter to take his weight off of it. Behind him, another camera shutter went off, and he felt Kirishima's hand twitching again. "Hey, Kirishima," he asked quietly, heart rate picking up again. Kirishima looked up to meet his gaze, but Bakugo shoved the words out before he could back down. "Kiss me?" "What?" he asked. "Really? In front of people? And cameras? You're not even, like, out, in case you've forgotten." "I don't give a single fuck about any of that." Kirishima glanced around nervously. He trailed off, and Bakugo raised an unimpressed brow. "I don't think I'm allowed to do that at work." Bakugo blinked and his flushed face, his uncertain expression, then snorted unceremoniously. "I'm a fucking professional hero, and I just saved the city from gang violence or whatever," he retorted, half pouting. "Can't you make an exception?" Kirishima giggled openly at that, and Bakugo had thought that no matter how much Kirishima laughed, he could never ever grow tired of that sound. "Sorry," he said, eyes twinkling. "No exceptions for heroes." Bakugo's eyes widened in indignation. "But," Kirishima continued, "I suppose I can make one for my favorite regular." And Bakugo barely had time to process his words before Kirishima was bridging the gap between them and pressing a kiss to his lips. Vaguely, he was aware of more camera sounds going off behind him, of loud and excited whispers from the customers. However, he couldn't bring himself to give any of them a second thought, not when he was finally fucking kissing Kirishima Eiichiro. He was much more gentle than Bakugo would have guessed, which was probably a good thing because Bakugo already felt like his heart was going to beat out of its chest. He brought up his free hand to cup Kirishima's face. The little noise he got in response was enough to make him feel lightheaded. He stroked a thumb across his cheek, reveling in the chatter fading into the background, in Kirishima flooding his senses. Kissing him was so good. Like, really fucking good. Electric and tingly and all-encompassing. It wasn't until Kirishima pulled back and he tried to open his eyes that he fully realized why kissing him was making him feel quite so dizzy. "Hey, Kirishima," he said again, looking at his now hopefully boyfriend through heavy black spots in his vision. "I think I need to go to the hospital. Lost a lot of blood." Luckily, he caught his head in his hands as he sagged onto the counter. "Holy shit, Katsuki!" Kirishima barked, his face morphing into a horrified expression as he leaned over and zeroed in on Bakugo's blood-covered leg. "You idiot!" Within 3 minutes, Kirishima managed to have everyone out and the shop entirely closed. He pulled a smiling but still lightheaded Bakugo out by his hand before locking up and dragging him to his car. Time passes. They spent the majority of their first date at the hospital, and Bakugo did his best to make up for the less than romantic location by giving Kirishima as many kisses as physically possible without the doctors kicking them out. Maybe it was the blood loss, but he also apologized for making such a fucking ass out of himself over this past several months, no less than 15 times over the course of the night. While he was getting his leg and hand stitched up, Kirishima happily entertained himself on the hero gossip websites, which were now going absolutely wild with the news of Ground Zero and the mystery barista. Apparently, they even had a couple name already, despite no one knowing who Kirishima was. Ground Coffee. Fucking ridiculous, really, but Kirishima seemed to love it, so Bakugo supposed it wasn't all that bad. Despite the stitches, it was the best Christmas Eve Bakugo could have asked for. Though, if he was being completely honest, he was pretty sure he'd have been happy doing just about anything as long as he got to do it with Kirishima. Time passes. And as it turned out, Bakugo's concern was unfounded. Their cats ended up being fast friends and eventually even better adopted siblings. All right, friends, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this fic. This is literally one of my favorites, and honestly, huge thank you to arxaris for allowing me to do a podfic of it. I have a couple other podfics that authors have given me permission to do, so if you liked this one and you liked hearing some podfics that weren't written by me, then please consider subscribing to the channel and coming back so that you can hear some more. I hope to see you guys next time. Bye.